I'm talking about real peace and real justice and real love and healing, and actually the ability to transform this place as a global example that how different world could look like.
ImaginAction Podcast.
ImaginAction.
Creando comunità trasformative per il futuro.
ImaginAction Podcast.
Social arts across borders. לבנות קהילות
Crediamo che
טרנספורמטיביות לעתיד.
l'immaginazione.
Building transformative communities for future.
Nosotros creemos que la imaginación es el derecho universal.
Podcast ImaginAction.
We believe imagination is our universal right and regeneration is our collective responsibility.
I feel to introduce this conversation with two things. Like one, my name is Uri and I'm in Italy. I was born in the Galilee, which is my way of avoiding. A lot of the time I avoid the political definition of the land where I was born into. But I came to realize in the last year that you cannot avoid forever your story and where you were born with. So this is a little bit of why this conversation. I called it and would like sort of your advice, your thoughts. And Daniel, who I met, I think a year ago or a year and a half ago, I appreciate your wisdom and reflection on ancestral medicine, but also recently about kind of Gaza and Israel Palestine. You have been outspoken about that, and I don't know. I feel would love to hear your thought. And Suleiman, we met some years ago. We even had a moment when we shared our personal stories in Jerusalem. Maybe, or I think, probably 10 years ago. And I really admire and appreciate your way of speaking and your personal story that I hope you can share with us here, and your views. And yeah, a few things that, it doesn't have to be that we talk just about that, or with some of the questions that I'm bringing to this conversation is, how do we heal when there is so much violence, and so much, not just physical violence like the people of Gaza are suffering, but a lot of verbal violence, a lot of narrative violence, a lot of trauma awakening. I can feel that in myself. I can see it in the discourse. I live here in Italy, but I read Israeli news and comments maybe more than is healthy. And I also receive other vibrations. And it just seems, I just recently felt very overwhelmed by a specific interaction with someone that doesn't know me, and made a lot of questions, and I felt very triggered in that sense. And I wrote on Facebook, like, so much pain, so little space. Can we make more space? Can we do less pain? So that's where I'm coming from for this conversation, and I would love to maybe you share a bit about yourself, because you maybe don't know each other, and what you bring to this conversation.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Uri. Thank you, Sulaiman. To take just a few moments, I guess, I'll situate myself. My name is Daniel. I live in southern Spain, but I'm a U.S. citizen. My ancestry is early English and German settler colonialist in North America, and was born and raised there. And people have been there for a lot of generations. And I am a founder, director at Ancestral Medicine. So we do ritual arts, spiritual teaching, earth reconnection, ancestral healing. I come to this conversation as someone who has not lived in Palestine, and I'm obviously not Palestinian, I'm not Jewish, I am Muslim, but in a way it's incidental. And I did live for just a bit in Egypt as a Fulbright scholar. I'm a student of Arabic language and culture, so I'm acquainted with the history. And my work has a lot to do with ancestral healing, which includes cultural healing, which includes looking at legacies of colonialism and supremacy and bad human behavior and how those are almost always intergenerational problems. And so my choice to be outspoken about what's happening in Gaza arises from that commitment in many ways. And uh, what's unfolding is clearly a genocide. It is the continuation of 75, 100 years of European colonialist occupation of land and colonialist supremacist policy that has dehumanized Palestinians for decades in a way that sets the ground for this kind of more extreme manifestation of the occupation that's already been happening for decades. So it's not new. It's not a surprise to anyone even remotely attuned to what's happening. And I feel complicit as an American citizen. I pay my taxes, which means my money is going to the deliberate starvation and genocidal, behavior of the state of Israel toward Palestinians, and especially in Gaza, but not only. And I think it's important as we enter the conversation to recognize it's not just a few bad actors. That a recent survey showed that 2/3 of Jewish Israeli folks support the blocking of humanitarian aid to Gaza. And so there's many, many, many people in Israel are in support of what's happening, all the major political parties, etc. So it's not just a few bad people at the top, although it's also that. I hold the United States, and I'll say just a few more things by way of trying to just like state some basics so we can enter a conversation. I hold the United States at least as responsible for what's happening through the supplying of arms, through the providing of international cover to carry out a genocide. And I think that for there to be healing, for there to be space for people's pain, as you're saying, Uri, there needs to be an end to the killing first. Like if you're in an abusive relationship, you don't process it while you're in it. You have to get out of it somehow. Now that's obviously not straightforward here, but just basic psychological principles are that there needs to be a ceasefire. There needs to be a releasing of the abundant humanitarian aid for the most acute relief. And then there needs to be a way to move toward an end to the occupation, because Zionism remains a very divisive energy and idea within a very ancient, beautiful tradition of Judaism. And what is happening now is exposing that ideology and occupation as a very supremacist extension of European colonialism. So that's my attempt to say how it looks from my vantage over here and respect whatever unfolds in the conversation. Yeah.
My turn. Thank you Uri, for inviting me for this conversation, and Daniel, really nice to meet you. Um, so, um, yeah, my name is Sulaiman Khatib, and I'm sitting now in Bethlehem, actually. I usually live in Ramallah, and my family lives outside of Jerusalem. That's where my family is coming from, and that's where I'm coming from. In a shortcut, my family is part of the oldest tribe that lived in this land. So I come from a long line of tradition of indigenous people that lives in this land, specifically around Jerusalem mountain, to say. I grew up in Jerusalem, outside of Jerusalem, carrying, like a lot of the heritage of the cultural folklore, the traumas, the wisdom, and so many other colors of my community where I'm coming from. And I follow the line. I wouldn't recognize in my story also the fighter element and other elements. And that's why I started my struggle since my childhood for the liberation of our people. I'm still committed to the liberation of our peoples now, either Jewish and Palestinians and beyond. That's where my soul is, my energy. Was part of the armed resistance when I was 13, 14. As I said, following the line of fighting for the cause, for the homeland. Um, my I end up in jail when I was 14, just like a shortcut of my background. I end up as the youngest political prisoner when I was 14 or 5 months. Um, I was sentenced to 15 years. When I became 15, I spent 10 years and a half in jail, Israeli jail. During that time, also my room in my family house was blocked by the army with cement and iron, so they couldn't use it as a family, as a punishment for the family. Um, During my jail time, I encountered first, I was very active also in jail, went through psychological and physical torture, especially at the beginning in the investigation time. Um, but honestly, I always felt belonging to the land and very grounded and strong. So I don't really have this, despite the power dynamic and the traumas, I didn't really have this victimhood mindset, I would say. Rather, I have more the savior element in me is very strong, usually. So you spoke about white slavery. It's not just, um, yeah, and the responsibility of making change locally and globally and being part of a global revolution for change and for healing. So I was part of when I was 15 was my first time to join a food hunger strike for 16 days, where I was living with kids, teenagers, underage in jail. And the food hunger strike is very important in our collective experience as Palestinian political prisoners and personally. So we spent the 16 days, no food, no nothing, just water and salt. And that's why it's called in Arabic and Hebrew, mayo meleh. This concept is very important. And actually this strategic non-violence strategy, we learn it more from the Irish prisoner experience, if you remember this, just to give the credit back and to show that the struggle is really not necessarily on the local level. And we always succeed to achieve our demands, which is basically improving the daily life in jail. And for example, to improve like the food and reducing the suffering and the torture and so on. That was my first encounter with non-violence struggle. And that's how I transformed from believing the only way to free our land, struggle for our cause, is really using nonviolent struggle which is very powerful strategy than violence. I just want to say this. I experienced both in my body physically, not through academic books and research. So when I was 14, I tried to free Palestine by my hands. I attacked two Israelis. I tried to kill two people. I used cocktail Molotov. I tried to do everything I could. Um, yeah, which is also traumatic experiences. But at that time, this was my adrenaline. I was drawn to, Che Guevara, Arafat, and revolutions. So I still carry this spirit. I want to recognize my full truth. Not from a bad place or hating people. I was not a violent person. Or from the education system or family, nothing to do with that. But when I was 15, I also, as I said, I joined the hunger strike a few times in jail. And what we call it in Arabic, basically معركة الأمعاء, like the stomach, the battle of the stomach. So the battle of the stomach is very important to really know about this and study about this experience. That's how I learn about nonviolence practically. Slash the knowledge that I come from a family that practice hundreds of years of what we call it smooth culture, which means um, steadfastness and resilience in the land. That's connected to the olive trees, to the land, to the earth, where my family are really connected to. You know, my family's olive trees, actually, some of them, we call it Romani, which is very old. Simply, it could be even coming with the colonialist era of Roma time. So imagine like hundreds of generations. And the local one, I believe Uri knows this, maybe Baladi, which is the local small ones. So like very long line of history and grounding. And that's where I feel strong and powerful, despite the power dynamic and the forces here. My sister was born when we were in jail, me and my brother, and her name Samud. She was married last summer, actually, after long years. So I come from this like very local family, very committed morally to the cause, very good people. And also, like I want to share in our tribal resources, which is not a Western culture, it's a different thing. There is a lot of goodness here. It's um, a whole different culture, basically that include also sulha, which is the reconciliation process. That my family still practice that, and many other Palestinian local families. And it worked in across the region like over thousands of years. Um, so coming from that place, it's also to put me in a place not just the Palestinian good guy, a hero, adrenaline, and a fighter, and also looking at solutions where I'm able to give over the years. This was not easy transformation. I just want to say this, where I'm able, out of dignity, out of um, goodness, from these resources of local resources, um, to show empathy to what we call the enemy, and to show mercy, to show possibilities, to search for alternatives, for solutions that can work. So I'm talking about morally being in a good conscious place and strategically. My mind works strategic. That's how it works. And also something that can work despite the pain, the hurt, the history, the colonization, the displacement, the traumatic Nakba, the stories that my family and my community has encountered over the years. A lot of my family actually has been living outside of the land, so they never been able to come back after 67, actually, not from 48, because my area was occupied in 67 because it's out of Jerusalem area. With that said, like my village, actually, I want to share this. My village, actually, I wrote this in our book, which is called In This Place Together. It has different historical moments that include a Hebrew-Jewish history. And still you can see it, like as a graveyard. I grew up with this. I don't grow up with one color. I come from a Muslim family, but the general vibe, I'm not religious person. I was always spiritual. But the general vibe, you know, living outside of Jerusalem or around Jerusalem and this land, I know this land is a very important historically, spiritually, energetically for the Abrahamic family and beyond this. So I'm very like connected to the spirit of the place. And through the years of jail, as I said, like I learned a lot. I worked in the library, also studied a lot about different revolutionary people in the history, not just non-violent struggle in, you know, Nelson Mandela, South Africa, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, others, because we always talk about the men, so also like to appreciate our sisters in the struggle, but also about armed struggle. So I just want to say jail is not a peace academy. I just want to put this out there to be clear. And through the years, I opened a space in my heart, in my soul, in my mind for, um, you know, a different narrative, basically. So I know our narrative by blood, by my body. I know my narrative is Palestinian. I studied it in Arabic, and then I studied the Jewish Israeli narrative. I studied Hebrew, which is very similar to Arabic. I knew some Hebrew from home, by the way. My father used to speak Hebrew fluently. I used to have Jewish kids friends to play soccer, football next to my village, actually. So I'm aware, connected to the different cultures here that I really love, and I love to have diversity in the land. And I did, yeah, dedicated my life to this story, to the liberation of our peoples, to the liberation of the land, to change the system. Because I agree with Daniel, actually, it's not about a bunch of bad guys running the system, but we need a system change. So for me, the problem is the system that run our life from the river to the sea, both peoples. Yes, there is a lot of power dynamic. Some people benefit from the status quo, and that's what's called peace. So for me, I'm here not really talking about that peace. I'm talking about real peace and real justice and real love and healing, and actually the ability to transform this place as a global example that how different world could look like. And since then, I'm very active and very committed in different nonviolence movements. Among them, I am one of the founders of Combatants for Peace that started by ex-combatants from both sides, among other things. And I'm very connected to the struggle. And now, of course, what we see in Gaza, the crimes there, the displacement, the killing of kids, and the game of like zero-sum game of us and them. I was there myself. And I just want to say practically is not going to work. And morally, of course, we are opposing this. And I'm very grounded and I see a different future. We can talk about it in the next. Yeah, but that's where I'm come from. Thank you.
Thank you, Suleiman. Um, yeah,
Thank you.
I know Daniel, you wanted to add a few things.
Yeah, just briefly, I thank you, Suleiman, for what you're bringing, and I just want to highlight, I guess, viewing things as an American, how the colonialist mindset really is very divide and conquer. And I'm thinking of the role of Christian Zionists in particular, and how, from ancestrally, generationally speaking, my perspective on the current genocide and trauma and really the occupation is that it's a creation of European supremacy, in particular Christian supremacy, and centuries of Christian hostility and persecution and horrific treatment of Jewish peoples, others as well, but in this context, Jewish people, and culminating with the Holocaust. And the without that level of extreme othering and persecution and supremacy, the weird colonialist ideology of Zionism wouldn't have gotten traction. And as it plays out, like in the United States, the America-Israel like lobby, it receives way more money from Christian Zionists than Jewish folks. And it's a very anti-Semitic ideology that Christian Zionists hold, that somehow if they're trying to bring about the end times and convert all the Jewish people to Christians, and it's like a really like problematic view in many ways. But I don't see it benefits the colonialist powers to frame what's happening as a conflict between Muslims and Jewish people, which is a terrible distortion of the history. It's a distortion of the diversity of peoples that are already there before the occupation. And it just feels important to name that as a kind of divide and conquer strategy, and that it's important to interrupt it and to see it as really and very much in keeping with an international movement to oppose colonialism and colonialist mindsets. And that there's a ton of available solidarity, and always has been, between Jewish, Muslim, Christian, others on the ground. I say that, I mean, you both already know that, many listeners might know that, but I say that because a lot of folks in the US don't have that level of nuance and aren't encouraged to understand that. And it's very convenient to be like, oh, this is a war, an endless ancient war between people that are different than me. Like, no, it's actually a very recent, in the last century, occupation that benefits colonialist powers and is fueled by often white Americans and they're Christians. And so So just naming the underlying dynamics there feels important. But let me follow the lead on where the conversation might want to flow.
Yeah, maybe Uri, I
Yeah,
add
go
one
ahead.
sentence if possible because this is really subject I really like. Usually, I love history. Well, I agree with Daniel, and usually people are referencing to history with the trauma. And then I just want to say about Jewish Muslim, specifically Jewish Arab relations, we do have a story to tell. It's not even from the future, which is something we can also be inspired, rather than from 14th century. All our families have friends from all like religion. And Muslim and Jewish has lived together like for 14 centuries for a good story to tell. And I guess Daniel live around Andalusia and South Spain. That's symbolically important. Um, I don't want to sell like a romantic story. They were like always in harmony, all that. Of course, we have our shit to deal with it historically, but definitely there is zero compare how Jewish were treated in Europe as, and the Jewish question in Europe is a European question, was never Arab or Muslim question. And I heard this by many Jewish thinkers. One of them, Iraqi Jewish thinker, I forget his name now. He just spoke about it a few months ago. Um, so that's really important in the memories of our families. They all have,
Avi Shlaim, yeah.
and definitely this is the history we know about, and we can learn from. So it's not a magic, like impossible to see Arab, Muslim, Jewish, Christian of the east of the land getting together. But that's how this region has been over thousands of years. Yeah, and I still call for us also to do like our inner work as Arabic region. So because I don't want to like think of like a fully of like romantically make it romantic story.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I realized that I didn't share so much about my ancestry and my story, and and thank you, Daniel, for bringing the Christian role in this whole thing, or you and Suleiman also specifying the European Christian. So my ancestry is from two parts. My father's side is from Germany, and they have been living there for, we know, at least from the 15th century, but probably before that. And they were the part of the Jewish, like many in Germany, that actually became very German in their identity. My great grandfathers, both of them fought in the First World War for Germany. Uh, they were respected. One was a doctor, the other got into a position of a judge in the Supreme Court of Bavaria. So they were very respected and very integrated. In the memories of my grandfather, he said that he only learned that he's Jewish very later on when he was in school and they went to the church and they tell the Jewish children that they don't have to go in. And before that, he didn't know there was any difference between him and the other children. Um, so, which and fortunately for my direct family, my grandparents, they had a, let's say, a prior warning to what's happening, and they left to Argentina originally. They decided, so my grandfather was like learning to be a lawyer, but then he came to do his final exam, and there was a sign: "There's no entrance for Jews and dogs." So he figured that he might need to change the occupation that he's studying, and he went to be a farmer. And he was part of a not so known part of movement of Jewish young people that wanted to return to the land, but not necessarily in Israel. So they moved to other countries, mostly Argentina and Brazil, in kind of agricultural colonies, and in a similar dynamics in which actually the land was paid by rich Jewish patrons because the young people didn't have the money to buy the land, and they were living in this kind of in the Pampa in Entre Rios in Argentina for some years. And at some point, it became clear that they couldn't give their children the kind of life that they wanted to give them in terms of university, in terms of life, that they would, and it was starting to be in Argentina as well. Like Peron was coming, so there's it becomes a bit strange again. And they had friends that were in Israel, now Israel. So in the 50s, they moved to live there, but they were not like, let's say, Zionist by original persuasion, but more as a necessity and comfort, and very, very humanistic, very connected with kind of Buber. They were following of Buber thought, and let's say, um, and yeah, they were relatively, but there were stories of other of that family that didn't live in time or chose to stay and died in including the great uncle, so the brother of my great grandfather, who was actually a professor of international law. He was an important pioneer of international law. And although he had many options to go to the United States and leave, he decided to stay. And he and his wife, they suicided in their apartment just before they were going to pick them up for the concentration camps. So they knew that something is going to happen, and they chose to kind of die in that way. There are other stories that I've been working to heal from my German side. From my other side, my mother's side, they came from a small village, very religious, like the Satmar, the same one that are very anti-Zionist until now. Communities in the border regions with Hungary and Romania. And in another very strange story, my grandfather, who got into a fight with some non-Jewish kids, accidentally killed one of the non-Jewish kids in a fight, and he was sent away from his village to avoid revenge with the other families. And in that process, he met Zionist movement that came to the city where he was staying and studying, and he became very Zionist. And he came to Israel in the 20s against the will initially of the family. And he became a terrorist. He was in the Etzel, which was a sort of a right-wing militia, which made a lot of armed struggle against the British mandate, but also as what they called retaliation against Palestinians, Arabs. So, and he was sent to prison in Africa after killing a British policeman, and he was there until what we call Israel called Independence War, the Nakba. He was released, and he went back into the fighting. He never spoke about what he did in that war, but we know that he was a very fierce man and very angry, very angry. He lost most of his father. His father is 13 brothers and sisters, and their children. They all were sent to Auschwitz, and he was very angry with everything, including God and including himself, I think. And he was a very kind of angry, and he died with a stomach cancer. And I'm sharing about them, and because I feel I am in the process of healing all of that, and I've been healing my German side. I have a German side, and I'm still working on my fighter, angry. I have a lot of anger inside. I realize I have a lot of anger, and I don't know. I didn't choose to be born where I was born. I think nobody's chose to be born where they're born, and I did find myself in Gaza as a soldier, and 20 years ago, that's already 20 years ago, I've been a soldier in the combat engineering, as was the late Second Intifada, and my role was to go into tunnels. At the time, they were much smaller than, and they were like little holes in the ground. And I lost some friend, and I mostly saw a lot of destructions and pain that left me with a lot of questions about everything. I got my story that I was told, and a lot of processing to do. And right now I'm here, and I'm, like I said, I know I don't pay taxes to Israel anymore. I live here. My daughters are here. My partner is Italian. It seems like it's not true. My sisters are in Israel. My mother is there, and I'm identified as, right? So in this email exchange with a lady, I will not reveal her name. I feel like a lot of questions is coming to me in terms of where do I stand with the genocide, and she uses a lot of strong words, and I have like, ooh, what do I respond? What do I say? Who am I? What is my response to all of that, if there is any? And I don't have, but I feel like asking this question because I know that, right now it seems like the most strange question to ask when things are so bad. Um, there's so much pain and destructions and polarization, and it seems like a very weird question to ask, but I want to ask it is, what is the best possible future you see for this? And inviting you to be most like dreaming and real and invite all of us to, because we all have a stake. So even if we're not there, we have a stake. I think we are in a situation that everybody has a stake in what's happening there. Uh, um, so that's my question about what is your dream, and what do you see as possibility, like if you can really listen from the heart and speak from the heart, and what you would see happening and how it happens.
Well, I can try to say a thing from where I'm sitting. I mean, I think in the long term, ideally, there's a one state solution that's democratic and has equality for everybody involved from the river to the sea, and that it is worked out by level-headed people on the ground who have stake in that about how that unfolds. I think that's a complete fantasy anytime in the near term, from anything I can tell. But there, one thing that seems to happen when there's things are at the level of a genocide or like full-on destructive intent to annihilate a whole people, ethnic cleansing, genocide, call it what you need to call it, is that there are otherworldly kinds of powers that are like evil by whatever name, that starts to move even more thoroughly or dramatically through groups or systems and all that. And there is a acute need to stop what's happening with that. And I don't know how that stops in the near term. There's the United Nations has said stop the ceasefire. Even the U.S. stopped blocking it. Israel's not slowing in any way. So I think that having a much greater amount of sanctions and international isolation politically of Israel, to cut off arms, to bring some kind of repercussion. It needs to be physically stopped. The killing needs to be to stop. And I don't know the simple answer to that, but short of some kind of international force invading, trying to take over the government of Israel, which doesn't seem to be happening in the near term, stop supplying weapons, stop enabling it. So until the fresh killing has stopped, there's no, it's hard for me to think about how would you think about long-term peace? But the memory of the land and of the ancestors is a long memory. I want, like, perhaps what's happening is a depossession of the nation that was created of Israel, non-consensually, but created nonetheless. A depossession of that, so that from the supremacy colonialist mindset, so that something different can emerge. But that something different needs to bring the wisdom of the, Palestinian leadership and other level-headed people. But it's not what's happening right now. So those are a few reflections from where I'm sitting, which is a couple steps removed. Yeah.
Well, so there is like really, I want to say like one, there is the emergency need to stop the atrocities in Gaza right now and West Bank and elsewhere. The war against Palestinian people, not just in Gaza, which is the worst situation right now in Ramadan, and also in West Bank. Here we live like in ghettos, basically in West Bank. That's how we move around here with settlers, violence, and army, and so on, and the whole system. So maybe a few things like that came out of this late situation. That one, you can't silence people forever. That's for sure. And second, running the status quo, and proving the daily life under the occupation is also not working. So definitely we need a historical political solution for the goodness of all the people here. Um, so the question, how do we free the oppressed and the oppressor? And that's a big question. And that's what I'm interested in, like in the long term, as a vision, as a dream, that I believe it's possible in referring to the story we spoke before about like coming from history and also inspired by future. And I'm as a living in the land, in the ground, I'm like totally practical grounded, but also I never lose the vision beyond what we can see right now on the now rather than what's possible, especially in this land and what it means to billions of people around the world. So I feel it's a really in the interest of all of us, and the morality is really to make this place um, a model for a global, more fair system, to say, or like a different system is possible. That's what I believe. And I feel the global awakening around the Palestinian cause now, it's not just for the Palestinian or for Gaza. I want to be like, clear about my opinion about this, which I appreciate the solidarity around the world and the awareness is definitely people want to see system change globally. And that's what I see. And from my place where I'm sitting here, I feel I'm in touch with a lot of people globally, like and locally also, to move where we're stuck right now to a different place where a global collective liberation movement is needed right now as the answer to the darkness, to the forces of war. You mentioned the evangelical forces, which I agree with Daniel. This is really some of the forces that definitely want our people to fight forever, to the last child. And I don't want to, like, I want to make this clear that, and also, of course, the divide and rule works, unfortunately. So I think basically as a also optimistic person, I'm a revolutionary optimistic person, obviously, even though I studied a lot of history in jail time. Um, I do believe there is this. I want to mention maybe one sentence about Zionism before I give my personal modest like opinion. I do understand, like I studied a lot of Jewish history also, and the Holocaust and the racism in Europe, which Europe didn't deal with it actually, rather than throwing the problem into other people. So until now, and keep making sure that like the divide and rule policy is still in place, which is not good for any of us, including the our neighbors in Europe and the globe. Um, so for me, I'm interested in really solutions for all of us. And that's why I mentioned the victimhood thing, although we have to take into consideration the traumas, the losses that exist right now and in the past. I feel we need like I think like from like knowing the different narratives, because as I said, I speak the two languages. I'm privileged in that sense. I know that the different narratives, and I'm searching for a new narrative actually that can save us all, including the oppressed and the oppressor, which is very challenging to say this statement, as you know, at this moment. Um, I think I really like what a friend of mine said some time ago. Like Zionist movement was as a savior for Jewish people in Europe, for the European Jewry, for the Ashkenazi, was like an ambulance and saved some Jews for sure. But this ambulance turned with the time to become a bulldozer. And that's how we feel now. That's what we see. That's what's happening right now. As a matter of fact, so going back, I don't want to search for Theodor Herzl was a colonialist mindset or was a free fighter for Jewish people. That's a different conversation, maybe other time. But the idea of land without people to people without land, all this bullshit, honestly, because I grew up here and I know our communities, it's like just laughing when I read about this. So we need a historical recognition, Uri and Daniel, from conscious people. It's a war of consciousness now between people globally and regionally, the people that want to take us into more wars, more killing, more dehumanization, and throw them all wherever out and so on. These forces are really now cooperating. Our, as Martin Luther King said, the people that want peace and love and harmony and non-balance in the world, we have to cooperate with each other, and this is the time. So for me, this is time of truth, the historical moment. As an activist, this is my best time ever. It's maybe strange to say that, despite the pain, the sadness, the losses, the suffering, the daily of our people here. And I can tell you the key of the liberation in our hand, not in the Israeli hand. I always said this, people said, are you crazy? You're just dreamer, or you're like on medicine. But this is how I feel in my body. It's in my mom's hand. And I can tell you, like in the end, back to the roots, because that's where I'm coming from. The army has like uprooted my family's olive trees to build a separation wall, 2007, 8, so on. And this was really a test of my ideas of living together and harmony and this. So two things to say. And we have to, like, they allow us to bring the olive trees of the Roman time, to plant them next to my family's house. And recently, I just seen these olives as an inspiration for me because I feel my body and the olive trees and the land are one thing. That's how I grew up. They grow up again. It gives me a lot of hope. And that's how, in the same time, it carry a lot of pain because, like my mom, can see her olive trees and her memory and her romance and her history and her intimacy and her everything from her kitchen. And there is a colonialist settlers coming from Russia or America or wherever they come from, under the excuse of God and the promised land and all of this, that God is like real estate person, basically, really like taking over this place. So how do you expect my mom to be calm? And she can't look even to the land because her heart is burning. Until my mom's heart is calm, I am not calm. And and I'm sure, and I represent my mom and a lot of people, the forgiveness and the love that she has in her heart, that I carry in my heart, that olive trees carries. Um, I want also the Israeli kids not to be in the shoes of the occupation, of colonization. I totally recognize and welcome, in a beautiful even, the Jewish connection to the land, the Jewish spiritual connection to the land. And I call our Jewish sisters, brothers, and everybody want to support, really to recognize our people existence and rights here. In principle, the practicalities, I mean, Daniel spoke about one state solution. I can tell you about two states, one homeland. There are many solutions. This will be an easy way. Once we recognize there is abundance, there is enough resources, especially in this land, and the recognition of our rights in both people in this land is true and practically, the Jewish story is inspiring me, by the way. Like if Jewish groups, both secular and religious, they never forget, Jerusalem and coming back to the land. Why my family in Jordan or in South America are not allowed to carry the key of the house or like their heart? Like why is this is so this multi like whatever like measurements is not working. So we're in a time of truth where my existence and Uri's family's existence is not a threat, rather the opposite in my eyes, and that's where we're heading. Some of us against the forces that want to divide us and us to like to fight forever. This is really the best time for this actually, where people recognize we are both here and we best make the best out of it, out of like practicalities. Like we have this joke, and I don't know how to say it in the end, but this is in Arabic. We say Zionist movement were a secular movement. They don't believe in God, but they did believe that God gave them the land. So honesty. So let's like really breathe on this joke with all my empathy to our Jewish brothers and sisters that suffering a lot in the history and need like a safe place. So my struggle and our struggle for the safety of our peoples both. And I see the collective here, like how it's interconnected. I can't see the freedom of my people without the freedom of the Jewish community from the fear, from the trauma. And you spoke a lot about the trauma response, Uri, October 7, and the trauma response that we have, October 8, October 9, until where we are right now, March 17, our people in Gaza, everywhere that displaced, threat of a new Nakba, and so on. But our commitment to humanity and to liberation is as strong as never, like most, never been like this. Even if we will, the price will be basically to be to death for the land, for the freedom. Just will come. I can't explain this. I'm not religious, but I'm standing for life. And that's where my call and invitation. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Suleiman, for sharing that. And yeah, I come out inspired, and I also hear in myself that, I should probably answer my own question. Um, no, over time, I've not been living Israel for uh, 12 years now. And I came back. In the beginning, I came back more to visit my family 3, 4 times a year, and then less with COVID and my daughter being born. And so every time something happens, 4 years ago, I lost my voice for 4 months. And last time I came with my family. The last day we were supposed to leave to Italy back was 7th of October. And actually, our flight got canceled, and we had to get another flight because all flights were canceled. And it's difficult for me, but I feel that I feel yeah. What I wanted to say that one day I fly in the I arrived flying, and I remember there was a shift because before I had a sense when we came to Israel that I have a specific love for that land. That one time I come and I felt that I don't have anymore any specific love for that love for that land. It's more like, and now when I fly over any land, I feel love. So it's a strange. I don't know how to explain it, but um, and I feel at some level I've been working with migrants here in Italy, and in my vision is people should be able to travel where they want, basically, and any people everywhere and stay there. So, like people in Africa should be able to come to Europe, and people in Europe should be able to go in Africa, and that's in people of whoever they feel. And at the same time, we cannot dispose of people because it's uncomfortable for us, either for real estate or for because we are consumed by our own fear. That it is not an excuse for disposing a people or culture or land, like in the case in Palestine, because of a name of some other story. And I just celebrate Suleiman that I feel yes, we need a new story, and maybe this story is a bigger story. That's what I would like to believe, that maybe it's a bigger story. It's not a bigger story than it's actually a very basic story. It's a very old story that we are humans, and there are things that connect us, and there's more that connects us than separates us. And and that we are here for the land, and about becoming indigenous in a true sense, not to a specific land or story, but in a full sense to the planet, to the living planet, to the commitment for the future, for all life, all people, all life, all. And and I put this dream that I come back. This is my little dream. I come back to Gaza and I can do theater, which is my love, with children, and I'm not afraid. And maybe they are afraid, but we deal with our fear through play. And is my dream that there is the possibility for me to, like I brought my wound to the land, I could bring my gift, my medicine to the land, and we can start to. I don't know when. Maybe not in the lifetime. Maybe it's. I think more strange things have happened. So I hold in this a possibility of this that of the healing is already here and already begun. And maybe you, Suleiman, represent for me more than anything that the healing is already begun. That the healing is already begun, and then that's unstoppable. That's a unstoppable force, like the olive trees that are born from under the ground. That you can cut the tree, but under there is life. So that life will prevail. That's my wish. And maybe, yeah, just inviting Daniel and Suleiman if you want to share something more. We close right now, and then we might have another conversation, but just for respecting the time.
Yeah. Resonance, Suleiman, when you're saying global collective liberation movement, I do think that's what's needed or what's underway, and more momentum is needed. Like, this is not a test. It's not a drill. Anything you've been studying up on, it's time. It's a before and after time. And I'm more connected to folks in the US, especially, or to people in spiritual communities, whatever exactly that means. It means a lot of things, but I'm seeing both encouraging that people who were not otherwise aware that they had to be politically involved to have a ethical way of moving in the world, that there's a need to be educated and engaged about those matters. More people, I think, are getting involved, which is encouraging, but not enough also. There's still a lot of tendency to want to check out from all of it. And I just want to underscore also, Suleiman, when you're saying like my body, the olives, the land are one reality. I think that in the long term, it's the earth, the land that's holding our stories. It's holding the stories of the ancestors. And like, if you want, here's a vision for the future, is like, who of the different humans living in the area of Palestine, whatever passports they have or don't have, what if it's a competition of who can be most beloved and kind with the land? Who can be most beautiful and honoring of the land, including the ancestors in the land, which to do that requires historical honesty. And so who can tell the most compelling, beautiful truth? And in that way, our belonging isn't a function only of passports or lack thereof, but of like earned relationship with the land. And so we have a long way to go. There are children and people of all ages starving to death right now because of US and Israeli policy, especially. And so I hope that the United States and Israel are decisively internationally convicted of a genocide, because I think it would be good for the soul of those nations to have to face the way that they're currently possessed by collective shadow. And that honesty can create a groundwork for long-term healing in the way that Germany has endeavored, but not fully gotten the lesson, but, nonetheless. So I think there needs to be an end to the killing and strong consequence that honors the capacity for Israelis and Americans and others involved to actually grow and learn from the mistakes. So that's, yeah. And thanks for the conversation. Yeah.
Thank you, Daniel. I'm really moved by your heart and your words, and really honored to connect with you both, Uri, Daniel. And I'm gonna invite you actually on air for a conversations that taking place about collective global liberation movement. So I feel your heart. You are in the heart. So I really feel motivated more now, and being in the reality, like definitely there is a lot of losses and sadness now in Gaza, with over 30,000 people. Lots of kids and women has been killed by now. Lots of death and displacement and starvation during the month of Ramadan. Um, Lots of trauma and thousands of prisoners in Israeli jails. The Israeli hostages in Gaza. I want us really to, and that's my invitation really, is really being able to hold grief and empathy to all sides of the story, um, and to give love and life and protect life for all humans. Um, and again, as I said, I personally and so many of us has deep respect to the people that have connection to this land, um, from the Jewish community, um, and have problem with how the system work. I can't support a system where a family born wherever in the earth, which I fully agree with you, Uri, people has the right naturally to move freely, not by the power dynamic and the privileges that we know and this system. And then I need a permit from these families that come to live in Jerusalem, where my mom also need permit, which she actually can't go to Brain al-Aqsa, which is our like ceremony, our like practices over centuries. And our family is also in the Christian faith in Bethlehem. They couldn't go last week to the church in Jerusalem. And I want the Jewish faith families also to be able freely and safely to pray in Hebron if they wish, or wherever they feel connected. Um, I feel this can be a threat for the scarcity mindset people, but this is also, and it could be really, there's abundance of love and abundance of resources to share, where we all can celebrate each other with love and really creating a different world that we want to see. And some people, okay, think this is a dream. Of course, this is the dream, this is the vision. I fully believe, inspired by historical visionaries, that this dream is possible and it's happening, and the healing is happening while the genocide is happening as well. So our invitation for people to join the healing, to join the love, to join to protect life for the goodness of all of us. This is not to save the Palestinians, to say. It's rather to save ourselves, and especially people in solidarity, really to ask ourselves a question, as we say in Arabic. I believe Daniel know this, niya, the intention. This is all going back to that. That's my invitation to myself always, also to balance the inner work and the outer work. For the spiritual communities, really to see what's happening in reality, and for the intellectual one to activate the heart and all of us. Yeah, and I believe the original story is the human longing, search for liberation and freedom. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you both. Yeah.
Thank you.
Shukran, thank you, Toda. And yeah, I wish you um, and thank you for being here and wish you good health and that our dreams come true soon. Um, and yeah, and healing and food and prosperity for the people of the land, people of Gaza, people of everywhere.
Ready? Yeah.
Well, thank you.
If you like the podcast, like, share, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Support making the podcast on Coffee and stay tuned for the next episode.